Good morning, class. Glad everyone is here. Today we are going to focus on helping you prepare for the persuasive speech that you need to have ready for next week. You're going to create and deliver in front of your classmates here a persuasive speech. So we're going to kind of look at that today. Have you ever had a friend convince you, persuade you to go to the movie with them? You weren't really sure you wanted to go, but they talked and they argued. Maybe they even promised you that they would buy you popcorn if you'd go to the movie with them. So you decided to go, and sometimes as this happens, you enjoyed the movie. You loved it. You loved the story. You loved the visual. You were just so glad that your friend persuaded you to go. But sometimes maybe they persuaded you to go to the movie and it wasn't what you wanted. You didn't like it, you didn't like the storyline, and you felt like you wasted 3 hours of your life. When we are voting for a presidential candidate, a candidate will attempt to persuade you to vote for them. They will talk, they will argue their stance on public policy, and you evaluate the truthfulness of the candidate's argument and decide which one to vote for. Sometimes you feel like you made the right vote. You see them as they carry out their policies. But sometimes you feel like maybe you were misled and voted for the wrong candidate. Well, like I said, in a week you're going to create and deliver a persuasive speech, and it can be on anything you believe in within moral and legal limits. I need to have you email your subject matter to me for approval, and that way you can get started on that. But first, let's look at the background of where this persuasive speech comes from. How many of you have heard of Aristotle? Famous Greek philosopher. It was really foundational to many of the things that we use as far as science, rhetoric, philosophies. But he was a student of Plato's, and Plato taught people to argue, and people who wanted to become lawyers or politicians would go to Plato's school and learn this art of rhetoric, of persuasive speech making. And Aristotle was part of that, and he actually wrote a book called Rhetoric, and within that book he lays out that foundation of how to persuade someone to your point of view. What Aristotle realized that there was real power in manipulating an audience. And that is why he really admonishes a speaker to hold to the truth, to really be a standard person that wants to be committed to the truth. And Aristotle says that if the audience decides to choose falsehood, it is the speaker's own fault for not persuading them well enough. Aristotle also believed that a successful persuasive speech relied on a system that appealed to the audience psyche. And we're going to look at those. And those are three things that you're going to need to include in your speech. The first one is logos, which means logic, pathos, which means emotion, and number three is ethos, which means ethics. And that has to do with the speaker's character and intention. So what other means of persuasion could we do in speech making? For one thing, there is intimidation. Sometimes someone will get up and speak, and they will appeal to the audience fear, or the fear of pain, or maybe they decide that they are afraid that if they don't follow this person, there's going to be real pain, and that has to do with emotion and with logic. But it neglects the person's character or intention. And this happened a lot with Adolf Hitler. People were afraid, and that's why they followed him. He persuaded, but it wasn't to that full extent. Another method of persuasion could be that charismatic speaker. And this person maybe is very funny, he's very personable, maybe he's very wise. And immediately, you as an audience member really like them. And it appeals to your emotions. But later on, as you're thinking about it, you're like, yeah, they were really funny, but what did they really say? And you realize that that charismatic speaker was lacking in that logical reason. And when you start thinking about it, you realize it doesn't make sense. What they were trying to persuade you to do doesn't make sense. And eventually you fall off. You find someone else that maybe is influential to you. So over the years, over thousands of years, using Aristotle's method of persuasion, using those three elements, has been seen to be most effective in persuading an audience. So let's look at those a little bit deeper and kind of break them down for you so that you can be prepared as you start creating your speech. So the first one is the logos, or the logic aspect, and that means that when you decide to persuade someone, that reason, the argument needs to be reasonable. And there's two different ways to do that. The first is you can go from a broad general truth to something specific. And that's called deduction, meaning everyone should be free, therefore my family should be free. That's called deduction. The other one would be induction, and that's where you go from specific examples and you draw a conclusion from that. So A plus B equals C. That's the logical part of that. The second one is pathos, or emotion. And this helps connect the audience to their feelings. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. One is with humor. Everyone likes humor. And when someone makes you laugh, you connect, and you feel like you could really resonate with what they're saying. Humor is a very popular way to connect with an audience emotion. The other one is storytelling. And this is telling a story about yourself, about someone else. And what happens is the audience starts, they become that person. They can really feel for that person. And it can conjure up emotions such as love, or anger, or injustice, or courage. And so when you're thinking about persuading in your speech, think about a story that you can tell, something that will connect you to your audience. The third one is ethos, or ethics, and that has to do with you, your credibility as a speaker. Are you trustworthy? Does your audience perceive you that you are honest and authentic, that you're being yourself? There's nothing an audience dislikes more than to see that someone's being fake before them. Also, you want to know a lot about your subject. And your audience is going to be evaluating, do they have intellect about what they're talking about? Or are they just making things up as they go? The third part of ethos is goodwill. Your audience needs to know that you have their best interest in mind. You're not just trying to lead them down a bad path, but you really care. If you truly believe in what you're persuading them for, they're going to see that. They're going to see that you really believe in what you're saying. So we have those three aspects that Aristotle created, and that is, again, the logic, reasoning, the emotions, helping your audience connect with what you're saying, and the other is your own credibility, your honesty, your character, your trustworthiness, and your goodwill. Those three things are very important to have in your speech. So now that we've talked about that a little bit, we're going to have you apply this. And so what I want you to do is pair up with a person right next to you, and you are going to convince this other person to give up their iPhone or cell phone to a homeless person. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to go through the logic, the emotion, and the ethics, and write down, take a few notes on how you're going to try to persuade them using those three components. And then I'm going to give each person 5 minutes to try to talk that other person in giving up their cell phone. So why don't we go ahead and get started with that.